because I am more concerned about your heart in this moment than I am your plate. And so if you
Wow.
can get the plate ready earlier, let's have the heart so that you can really connect with people, because they will not remember the food they ate. They will remember the conversation they had.
Hey friends, and welcome back to this season of The Mary Moran Show. If you are just joining us, this is a season we are lovingly referring to as the underestimated season, after the title of my third book, which just released this year, called Underestimated: The Surprisingly Simple Shift to Quit Playing Small, Name the Fear, and Move Forward Anyway. So all this season, which we are officially now extending all throughout the rest of 2025, as you can tell by the time this episode airs, I am being joined by some amazing guests, some all-time favorite past guests, and some brand new ones as we sit down and have the deep, hard conversations we love to have around here about all the different faces of fear I cover in the book. Things like procrastination, people-pleasing, imposter syndrome, self-sabotage, second-guessing, perfectionism, and more. And today I couldn't be more excited to be joined by my new friend, Abby, as we talk about this idea of how chasing perfect can keep us from just doing the real work of showing up, as we dig into her brand new book, Let the Biscuits Burn: Cultivating Real Life Hospitality in a World Craving Connection. Abby, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you? I feel like we need to give everyone just like a recap of what just happened before we jumped on the call.
Do it.
I jumped on our call, and it's like a Zoom call type thing. And I'm like still putting on mascara. I don't have my blush on. It is noon. We are recording at noon, people.
Listen,
And I
it
have been going
happens.
through my day, and I just didn't finish getting ready. So, and then I'm eating lunch. I poured an Olipop, all the things. And it's just, that is life, right,
Mhm.
Mary? We
Yes,
just show up how you show up. You don't have to. I would love to say I have a glam squad. Don't have a glam squad.
We're working towards that, though, aren't we?
There
Like
you go.
that's the dream.
Yes, the dream.
I love that you show up just how your book, and this is gonna become very clear as we dig into the episode, just how your
Yeah.
book teaches us to. I'm gonna like fun moment of like imperfection there. I totally forgot to ask you how to properly pronounce your last name, so I skipped right over that.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, oh, I bet she doesn't know how to say
I
Kuykendall. So that's why. So it
still
is.
wouldn't have said that. Like
Yeah,
there's an R kind
Kirk.
of feel.
Yeah. So the UY, it's
Hmm.
a Danish last name. Like, let's just go, let's
Okay.
go deep here on
Do
the
it.
pronunciation. Like we're in a spelling bee or something. It's a Danish word.
Okay.
KUY. The UY sounds like IR in
Huh.
Danish. So
Kirkendall.
Kuykendall. Yeah,
Just like that. And I'm Marantz like dance, I always tell people, and I
there
get to
you
do a little
go.
dance. I love
Well,
it.
Kirkin actually means chicken. So I wish that those like Kirkin like chicken, but you can't say that. Like it's not Marantz like dance. Like
But it's
doesn't
memorable. I
work.
feel like you could do a
There you
little
go. Yeah,
flapping when you do
little
it.
chicken dance.
Well, we're already having way more fun than should be allowed, so that's good. You dedicated this book to both
I
of
did.
your grandmothers, and I'm just wondering right off the bat, maybe this is an unfair question, we'll say it this way, but do you think that generation had it easier when it came to hospitality? Was it more natural to them? Was it more common, therefore easier? Or was it just they were working harder at it than we are, to make it such a common practice?
That is such a good question. And I don't just say that so that I can like process everything that's going through my mind right now. But I do think that their generation maybe not had it easier from a perspective of perfection, because I think that maybe they didn't have social media, they didn't have Instagram or Pinterest telling them it had to be perfect. They
Yeah.
actually had their family. They had their mothers, they had their grandmothers, they had women in the church that were expecting perfection out of them. And so I say that they had it easier from a habit perspective. It was just a part of life. And so they got to experience God in that way more than we do, because we don't make it a practice. We reserve hospitality for those gifted. We reserve hospitality for those that have the natural, ability to decorate a table or light a candle in their house, whatever it is, make a meal. And for them, it was what was expected. And I don't want to say that, like, I think we should expect hospitality out of ourselves, but I think that there's a degree at which we should.
Mm,
And I think that that's where, like, the New Testament, where it talks about, like, we've got to practice hospitality. It's a command. It's not just like hey, it's a nice to have. And so when you think about it like that, it's like, oh, wow, it should kind of be expected of everyone to show hospitality. But in church, we've reserved it for those that, you know, test high on the spiritual gift assessment test, that, like, oh, you're in hospitality, great, you're going to be a greeter. Well, what if we all practice that? I don't know. So that's kind of the long and short of it. I think that it was expected of them, so maybe it was easier to make it a habit, but also they had pressure from people, which is hard.
right. Right. Yeah. I feel like, yeah, I think I can imagine that sort of like your grandmother's mothers being like really tough on them,
Oh
like,
yeah.
listen,
Oh
we're not
yeah.
messing around.
No.
We've survived the depression. We're going to do this properly.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
my grandmother's, the one thing that I remember so vividly is that everything was hot and ready at the same time. And I don't
Yeah.
know if you cook much or if your
No.
listeners cook much, but
No.
that is the hardest part of cooking and inviting people in, is like making sure the rolls are hot at the same time the turkey is, like, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, but they come out at completely different times and they are in completely different oven temperatures, and it's like it's a whole math
That's a whole thing.
chemistry
Yeah.
equation, and they did it without a
Right.
calculator on their phone. And I mean,
Yeah.
they were super women, and I think
Right.
we've lost that little art.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you talk very early in the book about watching the Martha documentary on Netflix, which I super still want to watch. I've not seen it. But you
Yeah.
say Martha's story is one of unparalleled drive and accomplishment. That I resonate with. Yet beneath the layers of perfection she presented to the world, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the pressure she carried.
Mm,
Her ability to create immaculate tablescapes and her insistence on every detail being flawless left me wondering, at what cost? While she built an empire, her life also mirrored the burden many of us feel,
mm,
this constant need to prove our worth through doing things right. But what happens when the pursuit of perfection overtakes the joy we are meant to experience? And I just wrote in my notes, like, that is so me. That is so me. Like, I have this um if you're going to do something, do it right kind of, like that. I feel like my grandma Goldie passed down to me. And when we host something, I'm so intent on the experience I'm creating for them,
yeah.
that it takes me a while to actually wind down enough to start actually being with the guests.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna like confess that right off the top. Like
I
I
mean,
really I
and
want to get
you're
the A
not.
plus on the results, and then I'm like, oh
Yeah,
right,
and
you're
you're
here.
not alone in that at all.
Yep.
And I think that when I watched that Martha documentary, and a lot of her perfection and her drive was driven by her dad. And so she was like really trying to prove a lot to her dad, and she just never felt she was good enough. And isn't that how sometimes we feel with God? Like, if you play that Martha dad relationship and you put you and God in that relation, like, we want to prove ourselves to God. We want to check all the boxes. We want to do everything great. But at the end of the day, it's like, but am I really experiencing God? And that's kind of the premise of the book, is like, let's strip that away. Let's strip all these check boxes away, and let's stop trying to be perfect, and let's just like sit with Jesus and experience him in hospitality, because he is a hospitable God.
Mm,
He's a God that welcomes people in. He's a God that invites. And if we can sit with that, I think we'd learn a lot more from God than we thought maybe
yeah.
possible.
Well, I mean, talking about sitting with God, this reminds us of another Martha story, right? The Mary
Yeah.
and Martha story in the Bible. And you say for so many of us, the idea of hospitality has become entangled with a performance mindset. And so, for those who aren't familiar with the Mary Martha story, maybe just give us like a brief recap of that. But then the bigger question I have for you that maybe you can unpack as you do that is, in the Martha Mary example, what do you think we actually get wrong about Martha and her priorities and her intentions that we sort of lose in the like shorthand version of the Christian retelling of that story, like the kind of like quick retell?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the Mary and Martha story, Martha's in the kitchen and they've invited Jesus over. Jesus was one of Mary and Martha and Lazarus like best friends. So it is natural for Jesus to come in. And so it wasn't like just one like a oh my gosh, a Zacchaeus moment. We probably would have seen Jesus in Mary and Martha's home more frequently than not. Especially if he were in town. And so I think that she is in the kitchen. That's probably natural for her because she feels comfortable with Jesus. And so she's bustling around and she kind of triangulates Mary and she goes to Jesus and she says, do you not see what my sister's doing? Which if you have sisters or siblings at all, like you've probably said that. But I think that when we look at how Martha or Jesus responds to Martha, he was like, "You're so distracted." And Mary has figured it out. And he actually says in one translation, she's figured like it's the necessary thing. And, that is so telling to me. That's so like maybe pinching on my heart of like,
Hmm.
the only necessary thing when somebody is in my home is to invite Jesus into the moment, but to sit with my people. And I like to look at it at maybe a 30,000 foot view, and then I'll get pretty theological on it. But if you see how Jesus responds to Martha, he says Mary is doing the right thing. She has figured it out. Kind of, she's doing the necessary thing. Well, what is Mary doing? She is sitting on the floor with the people that are in her house. So you can get super unbiblical with it and like 30,000 foot view, she's sitting with her people. But if you dive into really what she's doing, the historical context of probably her position that scripture says that she is kneeling and she's sitting beneath Jesus, that
Hmm.
is a teacher student uh, kind of
Posture.
posture. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so if you think about it like that, Jesus wants us to all when people are in our home, he wants us to be sitting beneath him. We need to be inviting him into the moment just as much as we
Wow.
invite people into the moment. And so I think that there might be like two different ways we can read the story if you want to read it like paraphrased and then you want to read it word for word. But I think it's both super important. I don't think that Jesus is saying, hey, leave me out of the equation, but I also don't think he's saying like, hey, leave the people out of the equation either and just sit with me. But I think that what we get wrong with Martha is that she is trying to please Jesus. That's our heart. When we go to our parents and we say, "Do you not see Mary is not helping me and I'm doing all of this work for the people?" Her heart is wanting to be in the right place.
Yeah.
It is wanting to do everything good. It is wanting to serve and love the people that are in her home, especially one of her best friends, Jesus.
Mm.
But Jesus so gently reminds her, "Hey, you're so distracted. Come be with me. Come be with my people."
That was such a beautiful, perfect answer, by the way.
Oh,
Like,
thanks.
I mean, you are in the right place to go into like deep
Mm,
answers like that. So
yeah.
I love that. Do you think, and I don't know the answer to this, so we'll riff on it and figure it out together maybe. Do you think there's any element, like if the sentence had kept going, do you think when we're thinking of like biblical hospitality, there that it does require acts in some level? Work in some level? Like, in other words, do you think there was any part of that where Jesus was like, "Listen, Mary has the right priorities, but also, like, at some point, Mary, maybe, like, go serve."
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I
And
mean?
yes. And I think that we can look at Jesus, look at God, I guess, essentially as the creator, as our example. So
Mm,
Jesus, God, didn't invite man on day one into the world. He invited man after making the sun and the moon, after putting the birds in the sky and the animals on the land, after making vegetation for us to eat. Like he prepared the world for us and brought us into it. And so in the book, I write about we've got to prepare our hearts. We also have to set boundaries. Like there are steps to hospitality, but one of those things is preparing our heart, preparing our space. And if you're having a dinner party, preparing your food. You know, I like to say that the microwave is always available. So make sure your food is done early. Like
Oh, yeah.
we can always reheat, but I need you to be at the door when somebody comes in, and I need you to be
Wow.
ready to like have a conversation with them. So that means the dishes are in the dishwasher. Like you've wiped down the count, like whatever your kind of non-negotiables are when you have a dinner party, they need to be, and you need to have foil on the food or whatever your situation is. But my grandmothers always had food out 15 minutes, I mean, to a T.
Yeah.
15 minutes so that they could fluff the pill. I mean, they karate chopped all their pillows. They went around, karate chopped all the pillows, maybe wiped off some dust, like saw little dust bunnies somewhere, and then put their lipstick on. I
Yeah.
mean, such a 1950s woman,
Yeah.
but that was their habit. That was their process of hospitality. And because of that, they could welcome people into their home with a glass of sweet tea, and they could have a conversation. And they weren't concerned about, hold on, I've got to put the rolls in the oven, or hold on, I've got to do this. So there is a level of serving, but I think that the example that Jesus gives us is, or God gives us, is, hey, I need you to prepare ahead of time. And so that your heart, because I am more concerned about your heart in this moment than I am your plate. And so if you
Wow.
can get the plate ready late, earlier, let's have the heart so that you can really connect with people, because they will not remember the food they ate. They will remember the conversation they
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you something right now. That was so good and so super convicting for me because
It's
I am
convicting for me too.
perpetually wrapping things up like 15 minutes after the arrival time. And then
Yes.
people show up on time or, even 5, 10, 15 minutes late, and
Yeah.
I'm annoyed, because I need 15 minutes to get it
But
finished
if you
because I want them to see
prepare
it
and if
here.
you like expect, and it's like, okay, you know what? If it's cold, we will zap it in the microwave. It is okay.
Yeah.
And that is just the mantra of like, we can always use the microwave, or we can always put it back in the oven. Hey, you know what, guys? Since we're having so much fun talking, I'm going to put this casserole back in the oven for about 10 minutes. Let's keep talking and then let's pray. And so then that gives the space even more time to conversate, but then know that, hey, this is where we're going in about 10 minutes. So you can kind of like plan, everybody loves a good plan or roadmap. But that's kind of how I interpret God's hospitality. That's how I interpret. I mean, but then you have the moment where Jesus just like, what, 3 hours after people arrive, he's like, the disciples are like, we don't have anything to feed these people. And he's like,
Right.
oh, let me just take this kid's lunch and we're
Right.
going to potluck. And it's like, okay, well, that's not really how it works in my house most of the time.
Yeah. Right, right. But you know what? Like that, I want to like hold on to everything you just said because I know that's for me and I bet that's for somebody else. Like when I set out to host an event, and my husband and I do a good number of events, we just did our annual movie night. And every year, the Friday after Labor Day, we host some fun backyard movie. This year was Back to the Future. We've done The Sandlot. We did Maverick last year, Top Gun Maverick. And we go all out with, like, the decorations and the party favors and the food is themed and whatever else, movie candy, all this other stuff, giant inflatable screen. We always do that with a heart to serve people, give them a great experience, bring the neighborhood together. Like, the intentions are great, but the piece that's missing is the preparing my heart right before they get there. I'm never at the door. Justin's always gotta go to the door because 'cause I'm still curling my hair frantically upstairs. And just that 15-minute shift could, like, change so much. So, I just wanna, like, make sure I'm saying that again because I need to remember it.
Yeah. Well, and it's so hard to put into practice, and we're not going to get it right the first time. Like, we're not going to get it right the fifth time. And there might be some days you get it right and some days you get it wrong. And that's where we hold space for grace. And we know that God can cover the grace, and cover us in those moments. But our heart and our expectation and our plan should always be, I want to meet people at the door. When you're trying to have a merry heart in kind of a Martha world.
Yeah, love that. So let's talk about, there's this quote you have that says the person talking about how so much of mine is about excellence and like wanting to get the A plus.
Yeah.
The pursuit of excellence can unintentionally build walls rather than bridges. Perfectionism, while alluring, can actually isolate us.
Mm.
And there's a line in Underestimated where I'm talking about how the way that I grew up in Appalachia and, being an Enneagram 4 with a strong wing 3 and a child of the 80s, very stoic personality. And so I say, we put on this bespoke stoic armor of shiny achievements. We wear these accomplishments like a bright, blinking neon camouflage, seamlessly blending into the background by paradoxically forever standing out. If all they can see is our latest win, then we'll never have to worry about them getting close enough to see our many flaws. As you can imagine, this leads to a very lonely existence indeed. It turns out priding yourself on not needing people is a great way not to have any. And so, like, the way I grew up is like, I never want you to know I need help. I never want you to see me struggle. I always want to present this perfect outcome. And so, this idea that it's like this, I don't know, I'm probably just saying this for myself, but hopefully somebody listening, like, we think if we put something together that's so perfect, people will love us more. But it's actually kind of like this, shiny as a stiff arm. Like, we don't realize that when we feel perfect, other people probably feel like, ooh, this, I'm feeling all sorts of feelings about how not perfect I feel right now.
Yeah, I think that when I have studied hospitality and studied, a lot of my research for this book came from a book called Making Room, kind of restoring the Christian tradition of hospitality, and it was written by a Catholic priest, bishop named Christine Pohl. And she spent time with three different culture groups for an extended period, like lived with them almost, to experience how their culture, not necessarily their Christian tradition, but how their culture, shaped by Christian tradition, showed hospitality.
Hmm.
And I just thought that that was, set. She really writes about how if we truly want to experience hospitality as Christ calls us to experience it, it is vulnerable, it is raw, it is authentic, it is show up as you are whenever you do. Like, and it's not like there is a perfect way to show hospitality or a perfect idea of what hospitality should look like, but it should also always be vulnerable, because when we are vulnerable, we are intimate and
Hmm.
we break down some of those barriers. And she said that that was one of the most underlying threads in all of the cultures that she kind of experienced with hospitality, was that there is this vulnerability that breeds intimacy breeds a conversation about Christ, and then it weaves your spirits together. And that's when we're talking about community, when we're talking about wanting to come together and build these deep relationships aren't surface level. They aren't talking about the weather or talking about people. They're talking about ideas. They're talking about themes. They're talking about emotions and their processing and all of the things. So I think
Yeah.
that she had some great insight in her book that I share a little bit in Let the Biscuits Burn, but it was all around vulnerability and intentionality, in conversation, and not wanting to put that like perfect facade up, which is so hard for me, because when I started my hospitality journey, I did so as like a single. So I felt like I had all the time in the world. And so it was like, oh my gosh, I have all day to get ready. So I would get ready and I would, my house would look great and all of the things. And then all my friends would come over and be like, oh my gosh, your house is so perfect. Like, your food is so perfect. Like, you are just the epitome of hospitality, where hospitality is not my spiritual gift. It is
Mm.
a discipline. I have learned the habit and the importance of it, but it is something that I have to work really hard at. And so much so that it would like take take me all day. Or I would like go home at lunch from work. So because I had a party that night kind of thing. And so but I wasn't breeding really deep relationships because everything looked perfect. Everything looked kind of stale, and people were like nervous about bringing their kids or nervous about where to put their cup, and because they didn't have a coaster. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is IKEA furniture, like wherever. And but when your pillows are kind of wonky or you've got dirty dishes in the sink, people tend to just open up a little, like, oh, you're like me. Fantastic. So
Mm,
let me share a little bit about my heart. Let me share what's going on. Little side note, I have loved this question when I talk to people because I am a stay-at-home mom, kind of entrepreneur type, right, whatever. But I don't have like a 9 to 5 that I'm going to. And so in my several of my circles, the question, what do you do for work, can sometimes be a sensitive question, right? Because like
right,
maybe I don't work, but I do work. I'm a mom. Like that is work, but our culture doesn't sometimes see it that way.
right.
But the question, what is keeping you busy, has been a
Mm,
question that like almost opens the door for like an emotional response, not a tactical one.
I
So
like
if you
that.
say, where do you work? Oh, I work at Walmart or whatever. That was my previous job. And so like that is a tactical answer that provides no emotional response.
Hmm.
But what's keeping you busy? Girl, can I just tell you, I have 4 loads
Mhm.
of laundry right now in my laundry room. And so like when you go to the bathroom, just don't swing open that door. Like don't look in there because you will fall into mounds of laundry. And so then that opens up the conversation. Well, hey, can I help you with that? Can I make you dinner tomorrow night so that you can do your laundry? And then all of a sudden it becomes, oh my gosh, you're showing me hospitality because we opened up, we went deep, and you got to see a part of my life. And then you got to show up for me. And I talk about this, probably, Mary, this is so embarrassing, in like every podcast I do, but I love even my own podcast. Like I talk about him it's way too frequently. And if he ever listened to anything I say, Dr. Kurt Thompson would be like, this girl is like
Oh.
stalking me. Like she knows way too much about my life. But really, his books are just so rich. And I just love how he almost talks about, like, to my talking about hospitality, he talks about the soul that we want to connect. Like his connection is what happens when you practice hospitality, if that kind of makes sense. And so his famous phrase, and I use it in my book, is that people just we are wired by God to feel loved and known and seen. And when we are able to strip away kind of that shiny stiff arm and invite people in to deep emotional vulnerable conversation, people feel loved, people feel known, and people feel seen. And that, in my opinion, is the goal of hospitality, to love others. And when you love others, they are known, they are loved, and they are seen.
So good. So good, and I also just, like, have to speak to this from a personal practical level of, like, when we started to record, like, I had sent you an email like, "Hey, we're finishing up the previous episode, we're running, like, late." And so I come into this feeling all, "Ooh, we're late." And the first thing I see is you putting on mascara, and it was, like, instantly, like, all that stress just whooshed right off my
Yeah.
person, you know?
Yes.
So
I
that
mean,
it
and it is just that easy, right? Of like, I'm
Mhm.
not coming to this perfect. I am coming to this, I could have emailed you and said, I'm running 15 minutes late too. But I didn't. I just showed up how I was. And it was like, hey,
Yeah.
this is what you get.
I love it. So building off this idea of vulnerability, um, great quote from the book. Hospitality is about vulnerability. It's about sharing our lives, flaws and all, with another human being. It's about stepping out of our comfort zones, extending a hand of grace and saying, "Come sit with me, be seen, be heard, be welcomed." And you talk about like as we've already kind of dug into, the best conversations usually happen when dirty dishes are in the sink.
Yeah.
So in my notes, I wrote, okay, this is interesting because for you, what becomes the balance of vulnerability and I'm inviting you into my life as it is, but also kind of balancing that with the side of biblical hospitality where we are becoming a haven for other people, where we want to create a calming, peaceful space, especially for people who are maybe having a hard time. Like, for you, is there some sort of internal check of like, okay, I've established that I'm vulnerable. I've established that I don't have it all together, but now we're going to stop doing that so that I can dim the lights and, you know, put on a nice cup of tea, or
Yeah.
so that this can feel like the world out there is crazy, but in here it's a safe place for you. So the balance of messy and safe, I guess.
Yeah. I That's really hard. I think that a lot of that happens semi naturally in when you're inviting someone in. Let's go down this road of tea or coffee, whatever you drink. And you're inviting maybe one person over. So my practice, my rhythms of hospitality every month, I pray for three different groups of people. One is a single, so that can be any stage of life, but they're single. One group of people is a family, like a couple family, and then the other is a stay-at-home mom with children. And they each three, the people that God puts on my heart for that month. The single, we go to coffee, or she comes over for coffee 3 times. And I hate to say like only 3 times, because maybe it's 4 or 5, but I plan 3 times. And so that's
Is
not
that in that month or
yes, in that month.
wow. Wow.
I take her to coffee, or she comes over for coffee 3 times.
Okay.
Me and my husband with the couple, we usually try to get them over twice a month. Sometimes, like right now,
Wow.
it's like really easy because it's like around football season, or hey, oh my gosh, come over before this game or whatnot. And then the stay-at-home mom, it's usually every week. We're like, girl, let's do play dates.
Wow.
And so it's like, it's something I'm like going on a walk with my kid, and I do that. I'm doing that anyway. And I just invite this person to join me. So
Whew.
I'm not
Whew.
making meals,
Abby, the
but
introverts are melting.
okay, I will say hospitality is not my gift. And so I have to make it a practice.
Mm.
Also, I've been practicing this and creating rhythms for 15 years. So if you are new at this, choose one person one time this month. Like that's what you got to do. But for me, it is sitting with my calendar. I like the just this morning, I'm sitting with my calendar for October, and I am mapping out hospitality before I map out podcast interviews, before I map out trips that I'm taking with my family. I mean, SEC football is still on the calendar first,
Yes.
but I
Yes.
mean,
Big
so,
12,
but
but yeah.
yeah, right. So I just think that like when we set ourselves up for hospitality, then we can prepare our hearts, we can prepare our minds, and we can prepare this level of vulnerability. So going to your coffee tea example, because that was kind of a rabbit trail. But when I invite this girl over for coffee or tea, the coffee's probably brewing, or hot water is ready, and I have kind of a tray that I always set out, and it is just kind of my go-to. It's like, I don't know, maybe 9 by 13. It's not very big, but I take it out of the cupboard. I put a couple of glasses on there. I have like a little container that always stays full of sweetener. And then I either, put out a couple of tea bags or some creamer or something, whatever's festive for what we're drinking. And that stays on the counter. And I will say that majority of the time, I usually have this tray and it has a very small pitcher of ice water on it. I'll either drink it throughout the day. It'll have a couple of cups on the tray, but I am notorious for forgetting to ask you if you want something to drink. If you come over to my house, that is like, I'm just like, the door goes, you go straight to the living room and you bypass the kitchen. And so it's like, oh, I forgot to ask you about, do you want something to drink? I'm sorry. Now we're talking and we're 45 minutes in and you're like, no, a drink would have been great an hour ago, but now I'm fine.
Yeah.
So always having that out kind of reminds me that if I do forget kind of the tactical side, the making the space, feel homey and cozy, it's already out. And so that is just a habit that I have in my life of like, this is my tray. If I know somebody's coming over, depending on what it is, we're putting something on it. We're putting a drink on it. Um, so then I can get out of my head about the tactical stuff and I can just sit with people. And because most of the time she's coming over and I've got a 16-month-old. And so coffee dates we got to get in and get out, like
Yeah.
we're not hanging out for 4 or 5 hours like I might have 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
We're like, you know, an hour and we're like, okay, girl, this was so good. We need to do it in a couple weeks and, or come back
Oh,
tomorrow, whatever.
yeah.
But,
Hmm.
did I answer your question about kind of the tension between your space and your
Mm.
conversation and
Well, I think what
it?
I'm hearing is like, you figure out what your non-negotiables are. Like you want to have the tray, you
Yeah.
let the rest of it go, and all of it is to free you up to be present.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
which is so
And
good.
because like you don't want to light a candle after they're there. Like
No.
you don't want to be doing that. Like I keep my house so cold. I think I write about this in the book of like I keep my house so cold and there's always a basket of blankets. And so
Mm.
I'm never like taking a blanket out and handing it to someone. I want them to, hey, uh, take your shoes off. Let's get comfortable. Like throw that pillow on the floor. Um, I don't ever want you to feel like you can't put your feet up or you can't get your own drink or whatever.
On a purely practical question, is each month a different person for those 3 categories?
It's kind of up to God. Um,
Okay.
I will say the couple has been the same couple for in my life right now has been the same couple for about 4 months.
Okay.
But on a side note, I have been praying for a like couple friends, and so I think the Lord is taking. If I was God, and I was answering your prayer, I think that this couple will become a close couple friend. And so I think that for me, hospitality has led to that. And now it's like I have to hold that tension of, huh, hospitality for them is easy. Now it's no longer hospitality, it's just friends getting together. So now I have to make more space for another couple. And we've gotten in a rhythm of doing dinner together twice a month. And now it's like, but we're being called to invite a different couple over twice a month. So,
Yeah.
like your schedule kind of gets busy. So,
Yeah. Like, are
but
you
like,
telling people, like, are you like, "You're the month of July,
no,
and, like, we're
no,
gonna do
no,
this 4
no,
times, but, like, next
no,
month, it might not be you." Like, if it
no.
does shift, are you ever just sort of giving them a heads up of, like
I mean, no, I think that all that kind of naturally happens.
okay.
Like I don't go into like a single girl and I'm like, "Hey, 3 times this month we're grabbing coffee." It just kind of like it happens, and if 3 times that month doesn't work out, like if we have to cancel a week or we can't get schedules together, like that's okay. Like I hold so much, I think that our relationship with God, I mean, if you are studying scripture or if you're sitting with the Holy Spirit, I think this too, but it specifically in hospitality, um, there are 3 components you have to have, and it's availability for God to use you, intentionality for you to ask him who to put on my heart, but also intentionality and conversation. And then flexibility because things are going to change. Biscuits are going to burn. People aren't going to show up. And that's going to be okay. But you have to be flexible enough to just be okay and let God hold space for that grace and use you regardless. And so that is what I told you was like the goal. Does it happen every month like that? Maybe not necessarily, but if I know that that is our goal for the month of October is the 2 3 5 or 2 3 4, like, okay, well, then that is what we're going to plan our month around because just like we plan our day around our quiet time or God calls us to do that, we also want to hold space for other disciplines in our life.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier talking about your mom at the conference, this idea of like entertaining being selfish, especially like the way that you're defining entertaining. And you use that as one way to start to begin the definition that you mean for biblical hospitality. So before we even get into the official definition, talk a little bit about some questions you ask yourself. You've mentioned a
Mm.
couple, but maybe just give us like a running off the top of your head list of like questions you ask yourself of, is this hospitality focused on others, or is this entertaining really focused on self?
Yeah, there is a great, I wish I had a book right in front of me, but there is a great chart in the book.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think the questions that I ask myself are around my heart. So, am I doing this for me or am I doing this for others? Am I concerned about the food and the decor and everything else? Or am I concerned about who's showing up and praying over the seats at my table? I also, conversation. So I'm really good at a tablescape. I can do that with my eyes closed. It's the conversation that really stresses me out.
Really? I wouldn't have
Yes.
guessed that.
Oh my gosh. I know. I know. I can talk a lot, but I don't always like I put a lot of pressure on myself to make sure we're
Mm,
having the right conversation, and not, gossiping or not like tangenting on something that is, you know, always not important. So I have they're called faithful hearts, I think. They're conversation cards and they are kind of like trivia cards in that they're like color coded. So if you want to talk about, I don't know, family relationships or your spouse, or if you want to talk about activities, like they're all color coded. And I have 3 sets of them. They are in the kitchen because I have kind of like a bar area. I have one in our living room and one at the table. So no matter where I am, that is kind of my safety blanket. Like if I have lost conversation, this is what we talk about. Um,
okay.
but for me, as I'm thinking about, is this entertaining or is this hospitality? The conversation and how deep, like, did I bring Jesus into the conversation? Or was it about, oh
Hmm.
my gosh, did y'all taste this food? I spent 3 hours on it. Like, I just want y'all
Right.
to know, like, be impressed by me.
Yeah.
If it, where is my heart in that?
Mm.
And I really think that like hospitality at its core is about your heart and the posture of your heart, like as you welcome people into your home and where your mind is. If your mind is on, oh my gosh, those rolls are about to burn, I think that that would be entertaining. But if you're more concerned about just like, I am so glad you're here because the spirit has something that he's going to do in you tonight, then like that to me is where biblical hospitality takes over.
Yeah, I love that, and that chart was super helpful. One of them said entertaining is worrying about the baseboards, and I was like, "Oh, no," because
Yes.
like, our baseboards are perpetually dirty. We have
Yeah.
2 golden retrievers right at that height, and they just
And I
fling
think like,
everything.
I think, to the boomer generation that grew up with parents, so like my parents' age, that had grandparent or that had parents that were like my grandparents, like the epitome of hospitality in my eyes. They grew up and a part of hospitality was the details. And I make it very clear the details are not what is making it entertaining versus hospitality. It
Yeah.
is your heart about the details. So I love clean baseboards. Let's clean them.
Mhm.
But if it takes away from the people,
Right, this
that's when
grumbling
we
kind of
that's
idea.
when we yeah, that's when we have the issue. Because like look at Jesus, look at God when he created the world. He's in the details. He's
Mm,
in the details in our lives. I mean, look at our cell structure and the sunset he paints and the stripes on a zebra, the feathers on a peacock. Like, I mean, he loves details. So I don't think that that's necessarily inherently bad, but it's our heart about it. And that's where maybe I millennials, I think Gen Z is going to grow up a little bit differently because they are very emotionally driven. And so they are going to be a more emotional generation than the generations ahead of them and be less tactical and detail oriented.
interesting.
And so
Yeah.
I think that Gen Gen Z, maybe even Gen Alpha, like when they come into this like hospitality time of their life later, when they can be hospitable with a home and stuff.
Mhm.
I think we might learn something from them about
Yeah.
biblical hospitality, just by the way that they have been culturally
Yeah.
raised.
Yeah, I for sure think we will. I for sure am also worried about whether they will gather, like, we're seeing
Yeah.
these memes about, "Wait, you really had house parties?" And it's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, we did." You know?
Yeah.
So, I think that's interesting. There's a scripture that you talk about the passion interpretation of. Let me actually just pull that up. It's the Hebrews 10:24-26. "This is not the time to pull away and neglect meeting together, as some have formed the habit of doing." Like, that's 2025
Yeah.
in a
Yeah. Right.
nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, we should come together even more frequently, eager to encourage and urge each other onward as we anticipate that day dawning. And I just think about all the memes. I actually have a sweatshirt, if you want me to be honest. I'm a very big introvert, Abby. And it says, "I'm sorry I'm late. I didn't want to come."
Yes. Well, and
Yeah.
I there's a book. Do I have it up here? No. There's a book and it's called I'll be late and I'll be in sweatpants. And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yes, girl,
Yeah.
still come in your sweatpants. It's great.
Right.
We want you here." And yes, I love that. That just don't neglect. And in some translations, it says to show hospitality. That specific, it says meeting together. And I think when you translate the Greek, it's almost meeting together like a conference or like a assembly. But the translation that says don't neglect to show hospitality really hits that point home of like don't neglect it, because if God is telling us, the author of Hebrews is telling us don't neglect something, then that means we have possession over it. That means that we have an action, we can take an action against something. And if you only think hospitality is a gift to some, then we all couldn't neglect it. Only some could. And he's not addressing only the Joanna Gaines of the world. He is addressing all of us, saying, do not neglect gathering together, meeting together, showing hospitality to each other. I think he goes on in chapter 13 to really dive into hospitality right after, I guess, Hebrews 12 is um the chapter of like the hall of faith or whatever, when we're talking about like all of the different um people in the Old Testament who showed
Like the
faith
great
and were,
leaders. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
the great leaders. And he talks about Abraham at that point, and then comes back to him in 13 and says, don't neglect to show hospitality, because some have done so to angels and been unaware. Directly referencing when Abraham and Sarah welcomed the strangers into their tent, they were actually angels telling Sarah she's going to have a baby. And it's like, if Abraham had stiff armed, I love that, the sparkly stiff arm or whatever you said, the
Yeah.
shiny stiff arm. Like,
Yeah.
like if Abraham had the stiff arm and said, "Look, my wife is so mad because she's not pregnant again this month. You can't come in. We're having to like go to therapy," or whatever it was, like he would have missed a call from God. And so making ourselves available, being flexible with our time, but also be intentional with how we're showing hospitality is just so important.
Love that. Well, I have like a million more questions I want to ask you. So I'm going to go a little rapid fire for a few
Okay.
because I want to get some of them in.
Okay.
Just before we even get, we still haven't said the biblical definition of hospitality. So we'll do that next. But even before we do that, if entertaining tends to be inward focus and hospitality tends to be outward focus, does any component of hospitality, should it be like actually serving like the guest's favorite food, or like having a gift that's, like stay with you? Like, does the bedside gift change based on their preferences? Like, how much are you thinking about that?
Personally, I think about that a lot.
Okay.
When I have people stay with me, like my aunt is coming in a couple of weeks to stay with me, and I already know I need to get some Diet Orange Crush, and she loves those nerds, whatever they're called, little gummy things. She loves them. So we'll get a package of those and put them next to the bed. Like there will be some things that I get for her. And those little things, I'm not saying go ham. I'm not saying get something monogrammed, but like those little bitty things make a difference in somebody's like, you thought about me. Again, it's feeling loved and known
Yeah.
and seen.
Well, okay, so that's a great transition. Can you give us that biblical definition of hospitality? I think the known, seen and loved is a big part of it, but,
Yeah.
we also get into, who's coming to the table.
Yeah, so biblical hospitality, the biblical definition is translated the word philoxenia, which is the love of strangers.
Wow.
And when we define strangers, it's stranger danger. That is not historically in Scripture how they described strangers. So they described it as somebody that doesn't think, act, look like you. Maybe they don't have the same culture as you. They didn't grow up in the same area as you. So again, right now in our world, it would be somebody that is maybe voting different. Maybe they are at a different church or not at a church at all. They are a random from your neighborhood. They're not in your community. Luke 8, Jesus says, and this is always a tinge in my heart, but he says, you want a pat on the back because you invited your friends and your family to dinner. Even my enemies do
Mm,
that. And it's
right.
like, oh my, that okay. So if I have my besties over for dinner, that's not biblical hospitality. Well, not by definition, but can we serve others with a heart that is outward and loving them and making them feel loved and known and seen? Absolutely. But if we get biblical on it, it is the love of strangers. And so it's inviting those that might not, be like you to sit at your table, experience God. And I wrote in my first book, The Living Table, that maybe inviting someone to your table that doesn't think, look, act like you, maybe they didn't grow up in church, it could be their invitation to heaven. Like that could be the first seed that is planted that changes eternity for them. And man, if you hold the responsibility of bringing somebody to your table, like with that much weight, it
Yeah.
kind of changes your perspective.
You mentioned yourself, you don't feel like you have the gift of
Mm.
hospitality, and I wrote in the notes, sometimes success coaches will tell us that we should spend time taking our 8s to a 9 or a 10, so, like, our strengths that are like an 8 from an 8 to a 9 to a 10 versus a 2 to a 3 to a 4, and so you then sort of talk about this is not just a gift, but actually a discipline that we're commanded to. So, like, I sort of like answered the question myself, I suppose, but like for somebody who just says, "Oh, I don't have this gift. I'll go focus on something else that I do know I have the gift of, like words. I'll
Yeah.
just go be an introvert and write words by myself," which I would be very tempted to do. Why is just the gifting not the answer? Why is the discipline act? Does that supersede the gift?
Yeah, I think it goes to the definition of a spiritual discipline, and the definition of a spiritual discipline is something that we do to draw us closer to the character of God. And if you think about something, what are you going to get more enjoyment out of? Experiencing the character of God because you're putting in the hard work and the effort to like build that relationship, or opening a present and saying, "Oh, this is really cool. Let me play with it." Um for me, it's the discipline. I am going to get more enjoyment by going deep with someone and experiencing them more than them handing me a gift and saying, "Oh my gosh, thanks for thinking about me. Now I'll use this gift."
Right.
And I'll think about you every time I use it. There's more I know I just said this, but like there's more responsibility with a discipline. There's more accountability. It is something that you decide to show up and do, not something that just like comes naturally, comes easy.
Yeah, love it. Okay, I've got one more fast question that's a general one, and then I have like 3 holiday ones that are gonna be super
Okay.
rapid fire. Okay, so the discipline one, kind of following up on the discipline one, this you talk about how hospitality is often considered to be the embodiment of love. And so having a rhythm and a discipline of this, as it's the foundation from which all other expressions of love flow. In fact, some argue that it's the very essence of demonstrating love. And I wrote in my notes in bold and red that this is so my husband, Justin. Like he is just very naturally acts of service wired for his love language. And he actually, okay, buckle up, Abby. I hope you're ready for this. I had said to him, our shorthand is like, I'll say, "Hey, my tank is empty," if I feel like I need some romance in my life.
Yeah.
My love language is gifts. And
Okay.
so, um, he's like, "Got it." And so the next day, and like we know internally it doesn't have to be like some dramatic, it
Yeah.
can be,
Right.
it can
Yeah.
be, but it doesn't have to be some big dramatic gift.
Diamonds. I require diamonds.
And anyway, he went out and he came back and he had a little thing of hair ties with a little red bow tied around it. And
Oh.
I nearly lost my mind because like a year ago bought one of those cans that says, "I hope wherever my hair ties go, they're happy." And
Yeah.
it had just become empty. And the only ones I had were super stretched out, about ready to break. And I had been meaning to hop on Amazon and order them. And I had not said any of this to him.
Aw.
But he noticed a stretched out hair tie up where I usually keep my hair tie on the shelf. And that was the gift. And
Aw.
I just think it's like, I mean, listen, I was like, that's just wild. Like, you're just reading my
Yeah.
mind. And you know me so well. And I felt more seen, more known, and more loved by this very small thing with a little bow on it, because it was like, I'm going to do this for you in particular. That is something that I don't think I could just like whip out of my back pocket. I think it comes from this habit
Yeah.
of hospitality, this discipline of hospitality. And you take in the book James Clear's framework of
Mm.
4-step process for habit building. He calls it cue, craving, response, and reward, and you turn it into your own 4-step process. So just briefly walk us through, if somebody's listening and they're like, okay, I got to be the person who buys the hair ties or whatever, the person who doesn't forget the water, whatever. What process can they do to actually start really honing this as a habit of hospitality?
Yeah. So, I think and I do use the kind of atomic habit, mindset. But I also think it goes back to the three: intentionality, availability, and flexibility. And we have to be available to hearing God's cue for us of saying like, "Hey, I need you to love on this person," or this person said this to you. I need you to act on it. And then I talk about like, what does an invitation look like, and how can we make that not memorable per se, but how can we make it impact? Like you matter. I'm inviting you, and you are important, and I want you at my table. And then taking it a step further, and like you said, like doing something small, sweet, special at, in the basket next to the bed for an overnight guest, or serving someone's favorite food. I think that it's so important, even showing hospitality, like with meal trains and stuff. Like, it's so easy for me to whip up like, oh my gosh, I make more lasagna in my life than anything else. But if that's somebody's favorite food, who am I to tell them that they need hot chicken salad? Like, I am going
Mm.
to be making the lasagna. So I think that, if we can show up to God, and we can in order to start forming a habit, we have to be available to listening to him and saying, okay, God, I want to be available to you. I want to give you my schedule. I want to give you my heart. I want you to invite people into my life, and then be flexible. And he might say, okay, Thursday night's the night. And you're like, right. But like, we are so busy Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So like Thursday's kind of our reprieve. So like, could it be Friday? And God's like, no, it's Thursday, like I've got a plan. And then to be intentional about that and following through, and not just intentional with God, but intentional with people. And making sure that they feel like they are seen and known and loved by the conversation, by the food, by the environment, by the follow up. Man, hey, thank you so much. I was supposed to have coffee with a friend in a couple of weeks, and I texted her and I was like, "Hey, I am so sorry. Me and my husband have to go do something, and I need to reschedule. I'm happy to like go into more detail, but we need to reschedule." And she responded with, "Thank you so much for being honest. Let's reschedule." And like, for me, that was not me being on. Like, I didn't bare my soul to her, but I also didn't make an excuse. I just said, "Hey, me and Kyle have to go do something, and we can't it's going to conflict with our coffee, and we need to change times. And so then it was like, okay, give me times, because now, since I'm changing the time, I will be flexible to your schedule, because
Yeah.
the Lord has told me to be available for
Hmm.
you.
Wow.
And so, like, it's all in that mindset. And again, that's the habit, right? That's how we get into a habit of spending time with people and inviting them in. Is I mean, there's that level of vulnerability again.
Okay, last question that's in this rapid fire, and it will wrap up our episode. I'm gonna ask all 3 of them. They all relate to, as this is
Okay.
airing, we're gonna be moving into the holidays,
Yeah.
and a lot of that pressure of hosting comes in. And so here are the 3 questions. You can pick one of them, you can answer all of them, whatever feels good to you. As we're approaching the holidays, let's talk about some of the burdens of hosting versus hospitality, right? Like, so just actually like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're always the one who does Thanksgiving, you're always the one who does Christmas."
Yeah.
So burdens of hosting. What does hospitality ask of us in terms of some people not always having to be the ones to be the hosts, that there's this good give and take between
Mm.
who's hosting and who's the guest? And how can guests actually practice hospitality towards the hosts? So if any one of those
Mm.
really likes, ooh, I like that one the better, then pick one. And if not, just riff for a little while. Tell us how to survive the holidays.
Yeah. So, okay, first of all, the holidays, if you are listening and you're like, "Okay, this sounds fun. I think I need to practice hospitality." Maybe you're being convicted right now listening to this, and you're like, but maybe not. Maybe not start with Thanksgiving or Christmas." Let me tell you, you are not going to feel rejected in November and December. So, everybody signs up for a party, everybody wants to come to a party, everybody wants to come into your home during November and December. So go ahead and have the people over, because then they've been to your house. Then it's a little bit easier to say yes to the dinner the next time, even if it's not a party and it's just you and
Interesting.
your husband. So I call this my gateway drug to hospitality, is like the 8-week sprint between, Halloween and New Year's. It's like you've got lots of time, you've got 8 weeks to
Yep.
host a party, to bring people into your home, so that